good morning, WinFM family, and welcome to the first edition of Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. This is the first edition of the program for 2025, and we will be reviewing this episode, all the big happenings that happened in 2024 and looking ahead to 2025 and what we can possibly expect for 2025. Today on the show, we have with us German Abel, Devon Cornelius, Jamil McPhail, and Andre Huey. We are all going to be discussing the big stories that happened last year. So first we can start with Jamiela. She can take the floor and talk about some of the big stories that happened in 2024. Then we can throw to Andre and then to Devon, and we continue the conversation that way. Jamiela?
Well, she is muted. Good morning, St. Kitts and Nevis. Germany here as usual, your host, your weekend host. Let's start off with Andre because Jamiel is having some technical issues on her end. So Andre, from your perspective, what were the big happenings in 2024 that you can articulate for us? Andre? Uh, he's also having some technical difficulties. He's joining us via Zoom. Devon?
Hi, Jermaine, Kevin, are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, good. I was hoping to go last as Kevin announced, but it seems like I have to go first because of technology.
It fails us sometimes.
Oh, yes. But nevertheless, let me say first, I am happy to be featured on the program for today to look at some of the major happenings for 2024. I feel that the year went by really, really, really fast, but nevertheless, we're in a new year and look forward to all good things. But in terms of the major stories that came out of 2024, let me begin by saying that there are a number of major stories that were impactful when you look at politics, social and community development, healthcare, national security. But for now, I want to highlight two stories that I believe dominated the airwaves, and not just the airwaves, but stories that people spoke about passionately, or things that people spoke about passionately. And you really saw in one of the stories where our community here in St. Kitts and Nevis and people, I would say, across the region even came together. But the first story has to do with Conris Maynard pursuing legal action against attack on his character and reputation. And that was in January of 2024. You would recall there was some, let me say, back and forth between Conris Maynard and Duncan Biglice Watley, where some allegations were made, and Minister Conris Maynard responded and refuted the allegations that were levied against him. And the follow-up to that was he was going to pursue legal action against the claims that were made against him. And this was a major story in January of 2024. And I would say this went on in terms of the social commentary on Facebook across St. Kitts and Nevis. It went on for quite some time where people spoke about it, not just on radio, but everywhere you went, Jermaine and Kevin, you guys heard about this back and forth and this legal challenge between Minister Maynard and Duncan Biglice Watley. So I think that was a major story, and I had the opportunity of writing an article on that story, which I think was huge. The second one was DJ Woody appealing to the public for help with son's medical expenses. And that was in around mid 2024. So that was around May 2024, exactly, where his son, his 15-year-old son, got into a near drowning incident at a beach of the island of Nevis. And as a result of that incident, there was need for him to have life-saving surgery that could not be done here. And so he had to be transported overseas. And you saw in that story where the people of St. Kitts and Nevis really came together and offered their support to DJ Woody and his family. You saw the government of St. Kitts and Nevis through the Children's Medical Fund offering assistance to DJ Woody and the family. You saw youth groups and organizations, political parties, all in sundry. Everybody came together to raise funds to offer, whether it be financial, emotional, mental support to DJ Woody and his family with regards to this. As you guys may know, unfortunately, Kevin Wood passed late last year. I think it was in December, and he was laid to rest about 2 Saturdays ago, or last week Saturday, I believe. May his soul rest in eternal peace. But those two major stories, I believe, were significant, and everybody, I would boldly say everybody in St. Kitts and Nevis gave their 2 cents and were impacted in some way or spoke about it and said, hey, this is definitely major. Apart from those 2 stories, though, as I mentioned earlier, 2024 was filled with surprises. It was filled with the challenges. It was filled with opportunities, and it was just for us to maximize on those. So if it's okay, guys, I'll stop here and I'll come back a little later to weigh in further on other major stories happening in 2024.
Well, thanks, Devon. I think the last one that you mentioned with DJ Woody and his son, I think that one captivated the attention of everybody in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's condolences to him and his family in terms of the passing of the young man. But what that also highlighted was an initiative that the Prime Minister actually put forward, which is the initiative to assist children who are in need. I'll jump over to Andre now, but let me first introduce my guest, my panel. First, we heard from Devon Cornelius, journalist at ZIZ, and he's no stranger to the program. Now we hear from journalist, CEO, and all things journalism, and president of the Media Association, Andre Huey. Andre?
Hi, Jermaine. Morning, Devon, and everyone on the panel, and everyone on the show, and the listeners. Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for having me on the program. So you want to get my pick for top stories for 2024? Yeah. There are quite a few, but I'm going to stick maybe to 2 or 3. I think crime certainly was on the radar for the early part of the year. There was a lot of discussion in the community in light of the incidents that were happening. Some were really gruesome murders that took place in the country, and people were very concerned. And I think, those concerns were reverberated right across the media landscape and in the public sphere. Of course, we saw a positive trend towards the end of the year where the number of homicides declined, and there has been a sharp decline in serious crimes towards the ending of the year. So that's a good thing, and hopefully that trend continues into 2025. Aside from crime, I think one of the stories, and a story that I've covered at length as well, is the issues pertaining to the Citizenship and Investment Program, the CBI. It came under fire on an intense scrutiny last year at the announcement of a lawsuit filed by MSR Media producer, Mr. C.D. Martinez. And of course, a lot of questions were asked of the authorities. The lawsuit contained, in my opinion, damning allegations against persons, public officials, former and current public officials. And, while those matters were not addressed substantially because of the fact that the matter was in court, and of course, there's certain restrictions in terms of what you can report as a journalist when a matter is in the court. But if anyone had read the lawsuit, you would have had questions as well. Of course, that ended abruptly by the decision of MSR Media, by Mr. Martinez himself and his legal team, not to pursue the matter any further or to drop the matter because of the fact that at this stage, or based on what has happened in the proceedings, for cutting a long argument short, some of the defendants have filed for immunity, and as a result, the matter may take a much longer time to be fully ventilated in the court, and as such, the decision was taken not to pursue the matter any further. But certainly, in my opinion, and I'm sure in the opinion of others, of some persons, there are questions to be answered. Question is whether those questions will ever be answered, seeing that the matter is no longer in court. So that was one, and just to sort of piggyback on what Devon mentioned with DJ Woodis, we saw last year a number of unfortunate incidents that happened during recreational activities at the beach. And in the case of the young man from Nevis who passed away, unfortunately, condolences to his family. And we had a situation in Frigate Bay. I think this was around, trying to remember which holiday it was, but it was one of the long weekend holidays. I think it was August Monday, where a young man was attacked by, well, we're not even sure exactly what, but something in the sea. Some people said it was a shark. Some said it was probably, piranhas. We don't know for sure, but certainly he was injured badly by that and had also to be flown out for medical treatment. So, these were some unfortunate stories that happened in 2024, but nonetheless, it was certainly part of the big stories that happened. I must also mention that, some notable public figures also passed away last year. I'm speaking right now of, for example, former sports minister Glenn Ghost Phillip. That certainly made headlines last year. And we also had the long-serving president of the St. Kitts Nevis Olympic Committee, Mr. Alfonso Bridgewater, who also passed away. And there were several others as well that died in 2024. So those stories certainly grabbed the headlines when they occurred.
Okay, that's really interesting, Andre. Those were indeed headline-grabbing stories of 2024. Kevin, what's your perspective on what transpired in 2024?
Well, I think piggybacking a little bit off of on what Andre said, the CBI program very much, apart from crime, I think was probably one of the most talked about topics throughout the Federation and probably throughout the region, because the program continued to be marred by, individuals who have these citizenship by investment passports that had been involved in international crimes, which brought continued scrutiny from the European Union, from the United States. And we had, at one instance, Mark Brantley calling out the European Union on their scrutiny on the CBI program, addressing the fact that we are, as a region who are involved in the CBI programs, continue to make changes and strengthen regulations in order to strengthen the program. And as we know, the program took a hit because of those strengthened regulations, which caused a dip in the CBI revenue, which then led to the whole promise of we were supposed to be getting CBI dividends every 6 months, but that was dependent on if the CBI program yielded any profits to be given out. And so that caused some hullabaloo a little bit. So I think the CBI was probably one of the biggest covered news covered stories, and it continues to be, because I think we continue to ask questions about how the CBI is being affected, how it will continue to navigate. Mark Brantley recently suggested And I think the Prime Minister picked it up in his recent roundtable where he mentioned targeting already existing investors instead of looking for other investors, considering the regulations have made it a little bit harder for the program to increase its yield. I think that stands out the most to me, apart from like crime and the recent trajectory of road fatalities that we've been experiencing the last couple months of 2024.
Well, thanks for you guys for outlining some of the major local events and happenings in the country. Let's go beyond the headlines now. Crime and violence, we know, was one of the biggest issues. Devon mentioned DJ Woody, and that spun off the discussion surrounding the assistance for children. So Devon, I want to start with you. When we talk about assistance, how do you think that incident impacted the country as a whole?
Hi, Jeremy. Well, thank you firstly for the question. In terms of how it impacted St. Kitts and Nevis, I think it was an eye-opener in the sense of what services we have available as it relates to medical attention and healthcare. And so immediately after the incident, there was an increased call by people across St. Kitts and Nevis for better services or more equipment to be added to our healthcare facilities. But you know, with added equipment or more advanced equipment, you're talking about big bucks. You're talking about a population size that would support the addition of these medical equipment or these medical services. So it's one to say we want to have this equipment, but at the same time, you want to ensure that whenever you bring this equipment here, it's not there for 6 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years, waiting for somebody to utilize it. At the same time, it's not that you're praying for something to happen to somebody so that they may utilize that service. So firstly, it was an eye-opener where we saw what our medical system or what our healthcare system could absorb, because after the incident, the young man had to be flown out. Secondly, was the financial readiness of people generally. So, you know, most of us would have insurance and a little savings here and there, but accidents happen, and these things are rather unfortunate. And so it may very well be a case where there was insurance, but because of the high cost of the service that was required, insurance and savings could not be much. And so because of the government's assistance, the medical assistance fund for children, the family was able to tap into that and receive the assistance. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you had people from all walks of life raising funds to assist the family. And thirdly, I think it was emotionally, it had an emotional side or an emotional impact, because Kevin, I believe, was just 15 years old at the time. He was just 15 years old. And many of us, we sat down and we said, hey, I have a 15-year-old nephew. I have a 15-year-old son. I have a 15-year-old cousin. And it could have been any one of them. And because St. Kitts and Nevis is such a small community, and everybody knows everybody, or you may not have known Kevin personally, but you perhaps knew his dad, you perhaps knew his mother, you perhaps knew somebody, or know somebody rather, who is close to him. So there was the emotional side of it where people were like, boy, this could have happened to somebody related to me, somebody connected to me. And so it was impactful in many, many ways, German. And I think it is something that would be etched in the memories, in our memory for quite some time, and people would always remember it. At the same time, I think Kevin, while he was injured in May, he lived up until December. And that showed how strong and, in my opinion, how resilient he was. He had some significant challenges in terms of his health because he damaged his neck. And you know, injuries to your neck are quite severe. And he held on for some time. He fought hard. There were people, German, who did not even know him personally, but they were extremely emotional. When I heard about it, I don't know Kevin personally, but I know his father. And when I heard about the incident, I was emotional because I immediately thought about his father, his family, and how difficult it was or it would have been for them to deal with such a news, you know, because even though Kevin did not die immediately in May, you know what the possible end result would be like if the medical assistance was not sought immediately. So it was impactful on many ways, German.
Andre, there were two other incidents surrounding children last year, which really impacted and touched the hearts of the people. But how do we, as a society, protect our children in 2025 as we look at these incidents? We talk about the one in Newton Ground, and then we talk about the one over in Frigate Bay where the young man was attacked. How do we deal with all of this and try to protect our children in a society that's one, polarized, and two, very politicized? Well, and the third one, there's a love for social media.
Is that one for me, Jermaine?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad you raised that question because there were some ethical concerns I had, particularly with the incident with the young man over at Frigate Bay. When the incident happened, he was rushed to the hospital, and a day or so later, maybe even the same day when he got to the hospital, photos of his injury, of his injured arm, were leaked to the public. And you could see that the photos and the videos that were taken, these were taken inside the hospital. Now, that's for me is an ethical concern. One, because, well, first of all, as journalists, we're not allowed and we're not, it's not considered ethical for us to publish those graphic photos. And I know social media has changed a lot of the standards when it comes to the release of these imagery, but as mainstream media journalists, we have a responsibility to hold the standards, and we would never publish something like that. If we had to publish it, we would have to certainly censor it considerably because it was a very graphic photo. And I'm asking myself, how did that photo leave the hospital room? Okay, well, let's assume maybe it was a relative who took it. Still, you don't leak those photos to the public. And what's the purpose of doing that? So as you talk about protection of children, Jermaine, that is certainly a concern and certainly something that should be, have to be looked into even more deeply, because with the rise of digital technology, the standards that are used to govern how we publish things, and in other words, people have to have some level of consideration for the family, and especially if it wasn't the family that leaked the photos in the first place. So I had a serious problem with that. I was very upset about it, and I'm not even related to the young man. I don't even know him, but I don't think that was a good look at all. Now, to answer your question more specifically, that particular incident with the young man, I was informed from someone who was very close to the situation, and actually, from what I understand, he was very active in helping the young man to get to the hospital in time. And this, I'm speaking of specifically Labby Gums, because she spoke to me when the incident occurred. It is important, even as a society, as a small society, that we look out for each other and that we try as best, especially for children, to be protective of our children. In a situation like that, he had to be rushed to the hospital. I understand that there were people who were on the beach, family members and others were, quickly corralled to, get him into a vehicle and get him to the hospital because they weren't sure the ambulance would arrive in time. So that is the kind of community support you need in times of emergencies that can lead to, people getting the assistance that they need, and especially children, because that is a very important aspect of it. So I think even more so, and especially in light of the fact that, with the technology, sometimes with social media, we can sometimes be a little bit aloof, and we can be just in our little bubble and our little zone. But really and truly, we cannot lose humanity. We cannot lose the love and care that we should have for other people, because it's quickly fading in this technological age. The technology is good, but if your first line of action is to try to get a photo or try to get videos as opposed to trying to help, we have a serious problem as a society. So I really think that that particular incident in my mind sort of shows the importance of community togetherness that we need to have in St. Kitts Nevis if we are to survive the challenging times ahead. And that is what we need. We need people to look out for each other and have that community and that camaraderie that we all in the Caribbean know to have in the early days when we didn't have the technology, when we didn't have a lot of the distractions that we have now. They have their purpose, but I think we really should also, as a community, really look out, and especially for the vulnerable ones, the children in particular.
Okay. As you mentioned that, Kevin, as I go over to you, what's your take on this in light of the fact that this is a growing trend that we've been seeing all over at this point in time? Social media, children freely operating. We saw what transpired in Newton Ground. How do we deal with situations like these and try to protect our children?
As it relates to social media and its use, a lot of the times people blame the actual thing when the thing doesn't work without human intervention. So social media is harmless unless the people that use it make it harmful. And so it comes down to the people that use it. And if we want to protect our children, then parents should get involved in what their children consume on social media. That is a part of the culture that needs to be changed. Because unfortunately, I don't think there's enough. Let's take the Facebook agreement that we all sign when we sign up for Facebook. How many of us actually know that Facebook owns everything that we post on Facebook? All the pictures that we post on Facebook, the posts, all of it, it is inlaid in the terms of agreement. But do we actually read the terms of agreement? Do we actually understand what we're signing up for when we're engaging in social media? And the problem is with the adults who are supposed to know better, because how can we expect anything different from the generation that comes up if we are not leading by example? And so it's an entire culture shift that has to take place in order to effectively protect our children in what they consume, what is shared about them online, because I'm sure we all remember what it's like to be in high school. Some of us had some kind of social media while we were in high school. Others of us didn't have social media when we were in high school. Imagine being in high school today with social media and the almost near permanence of information being shared on social media, and that how that could potentially affect your life, your future career, your educational prospects, and stuff like that. So it's an entire culture shift that needs to be had, where the people who are the adults, the people who should know better, the people who can read these terms of agreements and can understand the usage of social media, can then navigate. All social media have parental controls. Every single one of them have parental controls. But do our parents actually go out of their way to not only put parental controls on their children's feeds, but on their feeds, so that what you consume as a family is wholesome and good and doesn't, bring any tainted content within the family dynamic. So it all goes to how we use the medium. It can't be used without people. It's a dead thing without without its users. as I'm sure we know, TikTok will probably be a little bit dead in the US, specifically in the US. It'll probably die in the US because the users will no longer be able to use the platform how it was intended to use because of the ban. So without users, a platform will not be effective. It will not work. So we have to look at who is using the program and how we're using the program. So like I said, parental controls, be careful of what you as a parent consume because your children often mirror you. And so if you are consuming a certain type of media and it's influencing the way you behave, your child is also imitating what they are seeing, what they are hearing through you, through social media, etc. So that's my take on it.
Devon, just before we take a break, I want to get from you too. I want your response to this particular topic because there seemingly is a growing trend across the country and by extension across the world where children are allowed to quote unquote do what they want. Right? That's my perspective. How do you believe that we can protect them both physically in terms of allowing them to go out and partake in community related activities, protect them via social media, and also protect them from crime and violence?
You said German. How do I believe that we could do what? Sorry.
What more do you think we can do to protect our children?
Well, you made the point earlier, as did Andre and Kevin, right? And the point is, our people are not very responsible, and it's not just as it relates to news where you get a picture about an incident and you immediately share it. You don't even think about the family members. You just click forward and you send that, and you're not cognizant of the fact that it may harm or it may emotionally affect a family member. As it relates to our children, I do want to say that there are parents and or guardians who try their best, and they really do a lot with their children in terms of protecting them from the dangers of our world today. They really do their best with their children. They teach them wrong from right. They tell them this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're not supposed to do. Unfortunately, German and others, our children are some of them, quite frankly, and if I could be very candid, they don't listen. And so you spend a considerable amount of time instilling in them what the expectation is and what they're expected to do and what they should not be doing. But they have decided to chart their own path. They have decided to chart their own course. What can we do to ensure that they're protected? We continue to offer the advice. And you may ask, but you've been doing it before and it's not been working. My method is you try and try and try until you succeed. And so perhaps it is your approach. Maybe you are a bit hostile with the child or children. Maybe they're not understanding where you're coming from because of the analogies that you're using. But I would say try and try and try until you succeed. If you believe that this is not something that you could take on by yourself, don't be afraid to ask for help. And so it may mean that you would have to seek out the assistance of a family friend, a family member, a professional help in terms of a guidance counselor or something. But all in all, we should not give up on our children. And I wanted to also carry the point that Kevin made as it relates to social media. Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, and all of these social media platforms are really harmless. It is the people behind of them who have ill intent, and they are the ones who come up with the diabolical plans and different things that could really weaken and cause havoc in our lives.
All right, Devon, thanks for that. Very enlightening words. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, I want to get from you guys. Are we doing enough to deal with the crime and the problem of crime and violence in St. Kitts and Nevis. Because as much as we plan and we put forward initiatives, it seems as though it keeps circling back to the same problem. So we'll take a break now, and then when we return, we're going to discuss that particular topic. And we are back here on Inside the News. So yes, we're discussing this issue of crime and violence here. I think there's only one question that can be asked. Are we doing enough? Andre, do you think that when we start this whole discussion, we see to an extent there's a trend of quote unquote crime in general has been trending downwards. But do you believe we are doing enough? Because people only associate crime and violence with homicide, but even those numbers are trending down. Do you think that enough is being done to tackle this issue? Because that's one of the topics that was mentioned this morning that was of major focus for people in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yeah. Well, there are several ways you could look at that question. Some would probably think not enough is not being done because of the fact that the trend that has always been in St. Kitts Nevis is that you have a lull and then there's a upsurge. Hopefully there won't be one because we've seen a lull now in the past 4 or so months. But to answer your question, we certainly have to look at what is being done now and then make a determination from there to see if enough is being done. Let's look at what has happened in the past year. So in St. Kitts Nevis, the government would have had a 90-day citizen security consultation. And from that consultation, the problems are to be identified and solutions, all of society approach solutions are supposed to be devised. Now, we haven't quite heard the full results yet of what has been determined from the 90-day consultation. What is key, though, is that you will need all of society approaches. You can't just be the police. The police are, law enforcement agency that is supposed to enforce the law and look to solve crimes. But when it comes to crime prevention, that's where the rest of the society comes into play. And I think that is where some social interventions have to be instituted, also from the government side, but also from the communities. You will have to see more activities in the communities where the police are engaging citizens, where activities are in place for young people that will keep them occupied and take them away from potential criminal activities. You also have a situation where families are also in dire need of support. And I think there is some intervention and some support from the government through the various departments, such as social welfare, etc. But there has to be an even greater intervention where families are concerned, because that's where it starts. And if our families are not given the support that they need to ensure that we nip potential criminal behavior at an early stage. And that is why we have the problems that we have today. One of the results that I think was starting for some people who are hearing it for the first time at the consultation was that in St. Kitts, there are 15 gangs operating in St. Kitts. Now, this is based on a report that was done by USAID, which was presented at one of the sessions of the 90-day campaign in Bastia in Portland. And there were people there from the chamber, there were people there from different stratus of different organizations representing the communities, the various communities in St. Kitts and Nevis. And quite a few people there were shocked at the information that was given. Gangs, the names of the gangs, where they're located, how many people are involved in those gangs, and the connection between some of the criminal activities that we see on St. Kitts in particular, and sometimes in Nevis, where gangs are basically going at each other. So for us to even address that problem, that is a societal problem that is embedded in our communities and in our families. And that has to be addressed from there. There's only so much the police can do. And I believe that, I guess we can always make the case that the government can do more and can invest more in law enforcement. But at the same time, there's still another approach that we have to take, and that's the societal approach, because it's not a one-size-fits-all in this instance. So to answer your question, more can be done, both at the law enforcement stage, but also at the
Okay. Kevin.
communicators. That is
Okay. Sorry, Andre. Kevin, you've been covering the law enforcement blotter for quite some time. Week in, week out, we've seen guns being taken off the streets of St. Kitts and Nevis. Do you get this idea that there's a cohesion between law enforcement agencies in terms of guns coming in, frequent flyers, and investigations? Because we don't manufacture this. This is like a cliched statement now. We don't manufacture these things. It's something that has to be, our borders are porous. Astefan said this recently on his program. Do you think there's a cohesion or a collaboration between all these agencies? Do you get that either? Because the police might say, hey, we are doing it.
That's a very subjective question. I'm gonna say that on the surface, there seems to be a cohesive relationship between the police force and the our border protection, so the ports and stuff like that, and customs. Now, whether there is corruption within the systems that allow this porous nature of guns coming in, I can't say for certain, but essentially, as you mentioned, we keep getting illegal firearms that are coming into the country, and we are not manufacturing these things. We don't produce ammunition. We do not produce any kind of parts for guns or firearms to be made, and yet we still have illegal firearms coming into the country. As we were speaking about the prevalence of illegal firearms being found on abandoned properties and in people's houses, et cetera, it harkened back to the gun amnesty that was held in the middle of the year, I think, where there was only one illegal firearm that was sent in to the police. And while there was the promise of, okay, the illegal firearms could be coming and there would be no legal action taken for if you're bringing the illegal firearms, nonetheless, one came in, which means like the enticement of that did not outweigh the fact that these people still want to hold on to these illegal firearms for whatever reason. And as Andre indicated, with the prevalence of the amount of gangs that it is in a tiny federation like St. Kitts and Nevis, it suggests that more is happening in the criminal underground than even we could probably even imagine. Where we now have, well, not now, but it's always been there, but we're hearing more about it these days, where there is regional networks of criminal activity that are affecting multiple islands, which is causing police forces and other authorities from within the region and internationally to have to come in and do some work in dismantling these networks. So whether the cohesion between the law enforcement agencies is doing what is needed to get these guns off of the street, considering we continue to find more illegal firearms and ammunition, I think that more can be done.
Devon?
Yes, German. Well, I've listened to both to Kevin and Andrew, right? And this is my thing. We're talking about crime and violence, and I think it was Andre who made the point earlier that crime isn't just murder, right? You have white collar crime, you have different types of crime. But in St. Kitts and Nevis in particular, we tend to zoom in on murder, and I believe across the region as well. We spoke about the fact that we, as far as I know, do not manufacture guns and ammunition. However, we still read, we still see reports coming from local police that they have taken guns and ammunition off of our streets. And it begs the question, where are they coming from? How are they getting into St. Kitts and Nevis? And why is it that they appear to be on our streets in numbers? Because if you are to add up the number of times you would get a report from the police over the last decade, you're going to get a number that would blow your mind. And so the fact is, guns are here. How are they getting here? We do not know. And for me, that is troubling. But when you talk about murder in particular, right, German, we keep saying, what can we do to bring down the murder rate? What can we do as a society? And that could have two meanings. That question could have two meanings. One, it could mean that you are calling on everybody to play their part in addressing crime and violence, in particular the murders, right? Meaning you're calling the pastors, you're calling the teachers, you're calling the mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, you're calling everybody to address this issue. The second meaning could be you're just calling them. And let me explain. What about the murderers? Why is it that we're not asking those who are actually committing the crime to stop what they're doing? Whenever there's a murder, we blame the police, we blame the politicians, we blame mommy and daddy, we blame the brothers and sisters, we blame family members. And yes, I understand that they too would have to take some sort of responsibility. They too would have to say, you know, boy, I could have done better. I could have guided that child, and I have to take some responsibility for it. But you don't really hear people blame the people who are actually committing the murders, you know, German. And for me, that is troubling. It is very, very troubling. And so we appear to be spinning in mud when we're saying that the police need to do this, or the politicians need to do this, or mommy and daddy and brothers and sisters and family members need to do this. The big question is, what are those murderers doing? Are they taking responsibility? Are we saying to them, directly to them, because some of us know who they are? You understand?
But Devon, you touched on a point here, right? Politicians. We keep asking what the politicians and what the police can do in the government. But do you think at some point in time that the challenges that we are facing right now has to do specifically with the fact that quote unquote crime and violence is being politicized all across the board, and especially during election time.
Yes, crime and violence has long been, no matter how you twist it now, turn it, a political issue when it should not be. And so administration after administration will come and say, well, we have decreased crime to 10% or to 5%. And then if the other administration comes in and crime increases by 1% or half of a percent, then of course you know what the rhetoric is going to be like. You know what the response is going to be like. So that is part, let me say that is part of the issue where we have been having crime like a political football. Today, German, it is your fault. Tomorrow it is mine. Next week is Jamila's. Week after that it is Kevin's, and then we're gonna leave it with Andre. And that is how we have been treating the issue of crime. Is like, on one hand, we are outraged that this thing is happening, and on the other hand, we are happy that there is crime happening in the country so that we could score political points. And this is not something that has been happening in the last 5, 10, or 15 years. It has been happening for a very long time. And that is very, very unfortunate.
And I agree with that. We have to find ways and means of dealing with the problem, but too often times it is politicized. And when we talk about this whole issue of firearms and so forth, the police actually, and you guys would have seen the figure that they would have given, which is for last year they seized about 17, they're about with 300 rounds of ammunition, which is very, very much alarming because as we rightly are discussing now, we don't manufacture them. So where realistically, or how realistically is 300 rounds of ammunition able to get into Federation undetected? And I know a lot of the discussion will be the borders are very porous and so forth. So more work, more questions continue to be asked of how realistically, and I know, again, I'll just allude to a little bit.
If I may, Jermaine, I just wanted to chime in on this. I was looking at a report we actually broadcasted on our channel this week, yesterday to be exact, a report on Haiti, where they did an investigation into how the guns were getting into Haiti. Because just like here, Haiti doesn't manufacture guns. You know what's happening in Haiti right now. What they found out is that there are a lot of shipment, apart from it just entering your porous borders, there's a lot of shipment that gets into Haiti with food items and stuff of that nature that, people need. Haiti doesn't manufacture a lot of things, so a lot of things have to be imported. And a lot of these packages are actually not, when they leave the US, they're not being searched, they're not being surveilled, they don't know what is in these packages. They assume that they're food, but oftentimes guns are smuggled in these packages. And I would want to say the same happens in other parts of the Caribbean too, where a lot of items that legitimately enter our ports are being smuggled into guns are being smuggled in these items. They're not being properly surveilled in the US, and they're not being properly done when they land in these countries in the Caribbean. So you have a situation where if corruption is not stamped out in all different facets of the countries, the people who are responsible for protecting our borders. And I'm not in any way here alleging or insinuating that any of our officials here are involved. But we've seen cases in the past where persons have been arrested and caught who are within these organizations, within these agencies, that are held responsible for smuggling, whether it be guns or other forms of contraband. So there has to be a collaborative approach as well when it comes to talking about guns entering our borders. A collaborative approach, not just with the authorities here, but also with authorities, particularly in the United States. And I know there's a lot of talk about, because these are where most of these guns originate from, they come from the US. And the gun for drug trade has been going on for decades. So this is nothing new. So there has to be a definitive collaborative effort by the authorities of St. Kitts and Nevis and the United States and other countries as well to really stamp this out. Because if a serious effort is not being made to properly survey our borders, we're going to always have this problem of guns coming in. And the more the police pick up guns and ammunition, the more they're going to enter our borders.
That's a valid point. You made a valid point there, Andre, in terms of regional collaboration. I just want to shift, and this is something that has been noted time and time again in the press releases that have been issued by the police force, the Royal St. Christopher Navy's police force. Drugs, drugs. They found bags with what appeared to be white powdery substances, which, if you don't press enough, they would not necessarily indicate that it is cocaine. And then we saw over the years a number of big spots in terms of what is being found in St. Kitts. Either they came on the boats or they were, I don't want to say, but I want a better word, seized. So do you guys believe or suspect that there is I don't want to say a ring, but a slight ring here in the country where this is happening? Who want to take that?
You're referring to drugs and on in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yes.
Well, similar to what I said just now, drugs and guns are hand in hand. Guns are needed to protect the drug trade and to protect turf and to ensure that you do not lose out any um, any advantage, so to speak, amongst rival gangs. So guns and drugs, they go hand in hand. So wherever you find the guns, you will find drugs. And we know in the Caribbean, we are mainly seen as a transshipment point. Some of that drugs does not, some of that, all of those drugs, that is supposed to destined for the United States coming from South and Central America. All of it doesn't go to the US. Some of it end up right here in the Caribbean. And we've seen many, a lot of the gang kingpins, gang leaders across the region are all connected to the drug trade because that is their the way they earn their living. And one of the things that we always use the terminology that crime doesn't pay, and we know what we mean by that. That in the end, it can be detrimental for you. It's either jail or death. But a lot of young people across the region are taking their chances because they see it as their way out. They see it as a way of making quote unquote easy money. Just the other day, I read a headline in Jamaica where police made a big drug bust at an apartment complex in St. Andrew, and the drugs they seized there is valued at $500 million US. 500 million. There are companies, there are businesses, large businesses across the region that are not worth 500 million. So when you hear that and you think about, all the activities that take place and what you could actually earn by just being involved in it, many young people are taking their chances. And it's a risk because there's no guarantee that one, that you're going to be that lucrative, or even two, that you're going to make it out. But a lot of them decide to take that chance. And unless we can make that life unattractive and show them a better alternative, an alternative lifestyle, then we're going to have a challenge dealing with that. And that is something that we have to be able to tackle. We have to be able to show the younger generation and the young people that are coming up that there is a better way, and you don't have to go down that road. In fact, that road is not the best road to go down. But a lot of young people are taking that risk, and unfortunately, many of them are being killed either by other gangs, by other the US, because that's where the huge demand for drugs is. And we don't produce it here, with the exception of maybe marijuana, which may not in a few time be totally illegal. But in terms of cocaine and other forms of illegal drugs, they're mostly produced in South and Central America. They make their way up to North America. And on their way up there, St. Kitts and Nevis and other countries in the Caribbean are used as transshipment points. And some of it stays here. So we have to be able to tackle that from an international level, not just on St. Kitts and Nevis alone.
Thanks, Andre. But Devon, I want to get from you. When we talk about dealing with it from that level and getting to the young people. Do you think the NGOs, the social groups are doing enough? I know Canaipa and these others have been trying, but do you think the larger NGOs are doing enough to tackle problems similar to these in dealing with young people?
Sorry, German, I think I missed the context before because my internet fell, so I
Okay,
felt. Yeah.
I was asking, do you believe that NGOs and social groups and these organizations are doing enough to assist in dealing with the young people, preventing them from getting to this point of dealing with drugs, crime, and violence?
I would say there is more that could definitely be done, but from my involvement with NGOs and youth groups and organizations, they do a lot. And it may not necessarily be direct, where they are actually targeting people who are already involved in crime and violence, but there are early intervention measures and early intervention programs that they have implemented. So, for example, you have a Sniper. Being a member of the organization itself is an early intervention measure, because when you're a member of Sniper, you shouldn't have time, or you wouldn't find time to go and Skylark and participate in illegal activities. And being a member of that organization, there are a number of subgroups and committees within said organization that would keep you grounded, that would teach you a life skill, that would teach you different things that you're needed to be a responsible citizen. So I would say our youth groups, organizations, and the NGOs are doing the best that they can. Can they do more? They should seriously consider doing more. But at the same time, German, it also ties into manpower and actually having people who are committed to doing the more, and not just doing the more because they have been asked to do the more, but doing the more because they are passionate about the change and they really want to see that change happen in our country.
Kevin?
Can I jump in and ask a question because it popped in? What do you think? What do you think is the correlation between our current standard of education and the involvement of youth in crimes? Because I feel like, because, and this is a personal opinion, don't shoot me. I feel like our education system is a bit archaic and it doesn't cater to people who aren't necessarily, and I know they're doing a lot of work with TVET and AVEC and trying to do more as it relates to vocational work, but ain't everybody a scholar, you know? Some people work best with their hands, some people learn in different capacities, some people learn from hands-on practice instead of reading, some people learn, but so what do you think is the correlation between our current education standards and youth involvement in crime? And that's for everybody.
But if I could go first, I think you made a really interesting point there as it relates to our education system being archaic, particularly in the Caribbean. We mirror a lot of things done in the United Kingdom, and there have been efforts in St. Kitts and Nevis in particular to, for lack of a better term or word, Americanize the education system. You made a point about TVET and skills training and all of that. Unfortunately, in our education system or in our school setting, if you don't come out of high school with about 10 subjects, you're not seen as somebody who's promising. And there are educators and even peers who make students feel less than. And so you come out of school and you have 4 subjects, and you are, in some cases, immediately written off. You're put on the back burner, and immediately society only focuses on those who come up with the 10 subjects, right? And so right there and then, we may very well be molding and creating the next criminal because we have written them off. We have not given them a chance to do wonderful things and to take advantage of opportunities that may come. But I definitely take your point, Kevin, that it's archaic in the sense that we kind of tell ourselves this is what we have been doing for as long as we've known ourselves, and if it's not broken, why fix it?
I second that. I think what we have done is, and it's a decision that's passed down from generation to generation since slavery days, whereby we focus primarily on wanting our children to be the best. We have not necessarily focused our attention on those soft skills. We don't see singing as a career. Let's be frank. We don't see a plumber as a career in general. It can be a side gig, quote unquote. But we focus primarily on getting our children to be doctors, to be lawyers, right? We don't even focus on getting our children to be the next journalist, the next world blitzer. So the challenge is because we don't focus on these soft skills, when a child is not necessarily, his mind is not developed to the point to become the next rocket scientist, the next quote unquote, and bad person to use as an example, Elon Musk, then we are not necessarily developing the soft skills, the soft economy. Typical example, the blue economy. That's one of the things that we're looking at now, talking about creative economy. So these are issues that we need to generate and place more resources towards, and we're not necessarily focusing on that. It's good to see that, and I must commend this administration and the former administration for their focus on developing the creatives in the country, right, which is a good sign. But in general, it's not something that we primarily focus on. And it's not just limited to St. Kitts and Nevis. It's something that's happening right across the Caribbean region, with the exception of probably Trinidad and Tobago and maybe Barbados. We're not necessarily getting that that people really want their children to be the next Rihanna or the next Nicki Minaj. So to me, that's where the problem is. We still have this mindset that our kids have to become lawyers and doctors and pediatrician and these big glorious professionals. What about the next tennis player? What about the next Messi? We have these talented young people, and I think that is where we need to begin to focus our attention. Well, I don't know if anyone else is going to respond to that, but this is a good time to take a quick break because we are just about 45 minutes from wrapping. But we'll take a quick break and then we'll continue with more insight to you. And we are back. So today we are reviewing, it's our first program for the year. We are reviewing 2024 as it happened, looking at some of the big stories that impacted St. Kitts and Nevis. We have with us WinFM senior journalist Kevin Brown, journalist and radio host Devon Brown from ZIZ, as well as, and he's no stranger to anybody, Andre Huey, CEO, senior journalist. He's multifaceted. And me, your host, your weekly host for this program. Today we're fully virtual. Yeah, we're fully virtual today, taking in all the sights and sounds of everything. As I said, we are discussing what the big happenings were for 2024, looking ahead to try to find. So, guys, we talk local. Let's go regional and international. What were the big happenings regionally that caught your attention and impacted not just St. Kitts and Nevis, but the broader Caribbean region?
German, if I could start the ball, and I want to start on the international scene, and it was the.
Well, Devon, I was actually gonna save that for last, but go ahead. Give us the gist of what it was. Let me preface this by saying Devon had the opportunity along with myself, but Devon was more intricate in the happening of the U.S. election, right? And it was a big learning curve for him. And speak about that specifically, Devon.
Right. So I said I want to start the ball because I find that the experience was amazing yet interesting at the same time. So it was the US presidential elections in November of last year, which I experienced firsthand. When we got to the US, we were in the capital, Washington, D.C., visiting a number of government institutions. And one such institution was the Pentagon, meeting with senior officials there, the Foreign Press Center, and different areas. But being on the ground, you saw the election live, you saw it right in front of you. And it was an opportunity for me to get a better understanding of how the US government works, how the US elections work, and how US presidents are elected. We're seeing now where Donald Trump has been elected. But let me say this, Jeremy, leading up to the 2024 US presidential elections, there were a number of people, including me, I must admit, who thought that Kamala Harris would have won the elections. And I say that because of the apparent momentum and energy and excitement that she had surrounding her. From the time Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris was announced as the presidential nominee, people were seemingly behind of her and in support of her. Her campaign looked okay. But when I got to the US and I was on the ground speaking with Americans, particularly in Michigan, which is a battleground state, it was an eye-opener where I spoke to a number of people who said that they are Democrats, but they are moderate Democrats. And I asked, what does that mean? And essentially what they said, I'm a Democrat. I've voted for the Democrat Party as long as I have known myself, as long as I have been a registered voter, but I'm not going to vote for Kamala Harris. And I asked why. And they highlighted a number of issues, and two of the major issues were immigration, which is, I believe, a bread and butter issue, and that of the economy, because people are concerned about how they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to put food on the table, how they're going to provide for their families. And those were the two major issues that they zoomed in on. And they did not like her approach or her stance on those two particular issues in terms of her policies and where she was going. And so while they were Democrats and they really wanted the Democrat Party to win the election and they did not want Donald Trump to be the president, some opted not to vote at all. Others said, you know, we are going to go with Donald Trump. And today, on Monday, we will see him being sworn in as, I believe, the 47th president of the United States of America. But it was an eye-opener. And I don't know if it is a reflection of the American people or how they feel, but it was interesting.
Well, to add to that, Devon, because you know I was here as well because we did catch up.
Yeah.
The general issue were for me what I got and gathered from being on the ground covering the elections was the fact that people were, well, the biggest issue, to be honest, was the fact that things were, as we say, tight. You know, we say colloquially in the Caribbean, things were
Yes.
tight. The economy was definitely the biggest issue that I heard from people on the ground. Right? As much as the enthusiasm was there, the bottom line is, again, and I like to use this, you cannot tell a mother or single mother that the economy is doing well when she's not necessarily feeling it in her pocket. You cannot tell parents and families that when they're not necessarily feeling it. So you can say that the economy is going well, you can say that these things are going good, but the people must feel it. And I don't believe people were necessarily feeling that enthusiasm in their pockets, which was one of the biggest issues that I gathered while covering the elections. But I want to go deeper. Go ahead, Devon.
And to add to what you said, I also saw where a number of migrants, people of Hispanic, Africans, and different people from across America, where they voted for Trump, and they were in support or in line of the policies that he laid on the table, which honestly was very, very, very surprising to me because, you know, normally anybody who you speak to would tell you, boy, if I'm to vote in the US presidential elections, I'll vote for the Democrat Party. I wouldn't vote for the Republicans, particularly because of Donald Trump. But a number of the migrants there, they were not in favor of the policies that Kamala Harris had, as they were not of the view that those policies were going to address the bread and butter issues. Those policies were not going to address the everyday challenges of the everyday and the ordinary America. And you also must add that Kamala Harris, I would say, had less time to beat the pavement, while Donald Trump had from 2016 to beat the pavement and for people to really know who he is and what policies he has, as he said, to make America great again.
Well, Andre, I want to go to you. We're hearing a lot of these discussions. What do you potentially see as somebody who covers international relations as well? What do you foresee in terms of challenges for countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, the Caribbean, for example, because in the World Economic Outlook yesterday, the draft, the IMF did allude to some challenges if you talk about the tariffs and so forth. What do you foresee small states like St. Kitts and Nevis?
Before I answer that question, Jeremy, just two things. I want to chime in also on the U.S. elections. Let me first of all commend you and Devon for having the opportunity to cover the U.S. elections, because I always believe, as a president of the Media Association, I always believe that, and we always want our members to get opportunities to go abroad and to do coverage and to do media work abroad, because your scope is limited just in St. Kitts Nevis. We want you to have as wide a scope as possible. So I'm glad, Devon, you had that opportunity to cover the U.S. elections and Germany as well. Let me chime in quickly on the U.S. elections. I think the win of Donald Trump, regardless of how you may feel about him and about his policies and about his temperament, is probably the biggest political comeback story in the history of politics. because under no circumstances would I think many people would believe that a candidate that had so much against him, and Devon, you said something that he had until 2016 to pound the pavement. I slightly disagree, because I think many people in 2016 thought after he lost in 2020 rather, that he basically, his political career it ended then after the January 6th insurrection. So I think, not many people even could have thought in their minds or imagined that Donald Trump would make a comeback with all the legal troubles he had, attempted assassination, all these different things that happened, and yet he still came back and won the election. What surprised me most of all, not so much that he won, because I thought he possibly could have won, considering, all things considered, but I was surprised he won the popular vote. And as you said, Devon, he got a lot of support from Hispanics and others as well, which helped to propel him to the victory. And it's a perfect example that you don't win you win elections on election day. You could have all the support you have, you could have all the money. I've covered enough politics and elections across the Caribbean to know that a lot of times parties that are the front runners end up losing because something along the campaign trail would have veered, support in their corner. I've seen it so many times. Parties going with leading in the polls, and then something happens in the election campaign, and on election day itself, based on how the parties organize, they go in and they're able to win the election against all odds. So that is a perfect example of that. Now, to come to your question quickly, Jermaine, about what I think may happen for countries across the region. Well, let's put it this way. If we were to look back at Donald Trump's last administration, his administration in 2016 onwards, what was the relationship like with the Caribbean? For me, it appeared a lot to be a quid pro quo. What you can do for me, I can do for you, etc. I think we may have some more of that. Generally speaking, though, in the United States, their policy has always been geared towards, even when it's, they're extending their hand to the countries around them, or in this case, the countries in the region. There's always something that's in it for America. And I think we're going to have more of that for 2025 onwards. We saw a situation as well where there was CARICOM has never always been united when it comes to foreign policy. And that, I think, is one of the failings of CARICOM. We don't always speak with a united voice. We saw a situation with Venezuela in the last administration of Donald Trump, where there were some countries that previously had good ties with Venezuela in the Caribbean, in CARICOM, that somehow pulled back, or, the relationship soured. And you find those countries, the leaders of those countries, sort of joining with President Trump against Venezuela and policies that would have worked against Venezuela. We're not going to see much of a change in that, because I think, especially now with President Maduro being reelected, and there's still concerns about the veracity of the vote, and even the recent, which I found quite amusing when I saw it, the announcement of a $25 million award for the arrest and capture of President Maduro, issued by the United States. We are in for a very interesting ride when President Trump takes office come Monday, because we're not going to see the end of this Venezuela situation and the impact it will have on the Caribbean. So we do expect some interesting times ahead. I think, generally speaking, what tends to happen in the Caribbean is that, for the most part, Caribbean leaders tend to side with America, because, of course, America is our biggest trading partner. They are the world superpower. They are our closest neighbor in terms of international power. So to go against the grain, and we've seen in the past what have happened in the past, countries that have gone against the grain, countries that have stood up against America or stood up on their principles, what has happened to them? And the history is there to prove it. So I expect countries are going to more or less align mostly with what the US will purport. There are some things, of course, that are going to be challenging, and I think some countries are going to put up a stance against it if the president decides to go ahead with that. And I'm speaking specifically of immigration. The discussions about me even sending some illegal immigrants to countries in the Caribbean that have no ties at all with those persons. I don't think that is logical at all. I don't think that's going to happen. But if it's going to be pushed ahead, it's going to have some pushback from some countries in the region, especially the ones that are going to be impacted by it. So we just have to wait and see. Interesting times are ahead. But I think the policy, generally speaking, foreign policy to Caribbean countries, I don't think is going to change much, except for a few differences and nuances there, and especially where Venezuela is concerned. some interesting times ahead.
Okay, Kevin, I know we have been described in some, maybe the small island state, Caribbean state, has been described in some, what's a better word, the derogatory manner, right? How do we, what do you foresee in terms of a Trump's presidency from 1 o'clock Central Time on Monday, with a rash of new decisions, new orders that are going to be coming into play, and how that's going to impact us? Note as well the fact that the region is heavily dependent on remittances coming out of the United States.
I was listening to a couple reports, and everybody's at a standstill, it seems, as it relates to economic outlook. Even stock markets are currently, they close every Friday. Monday is a holiday, so we won't know how the market is operating until on Tuesday, which is after his first day. So a lot of things are on pause as it relates to the economic outlook for the United States going forward. But based on a lot of what President-elect, well, we could call him President Trump now because he's president now. Based on what President Trump has said about what he plans to do or what he wants to do as it relates to certain tariffs and certain economic decisions, he wants to put tariffs on China. We know a lot of goods are made in China, a lot of goods are exported from China, a lot of goods are sold in the US that come from China as well as within our region. He wants to put tariffs on Canada. He wants to put tariffs on Mexico, I think, was another one of the countries that he said he wanted to put tariffs on. We are already experiencing, well, the rate, there were certain rate cuts that were made that are supposed to now be affecting, people's pockets, and things are supposed to be getting cheaper, but we don't know if that is going to hold long enough for us to feel it in our pockets, as we are still heavily dependent on the importation of goods from outside. So I foresee financially, we'll still be feeling the brunt of inflation. We'll still be feeling the brunt in our pockets as it relates to bringing food. We'll still be feeling the brunt probably as it relates to travel, fuel prices that might, based on certain relations between where the US gets their oil and stuff like that, fuel prices might increase or decrease, and that might increase or decrease ticket prices, which will increase the influx of tourists coming in and out of the region, which will affect our pockets. So it's a big question mark at this point in time. But if there are any positive changes, and positive changes, in my opinion, would essentially be the tariffs don't actually come through. Because if those tariffs do come through, then a lot of goods will be affected, a lot of goods. And we're not just talking about, we're talking about clothes, we're talking about appliances and stuff like that. And we haven't even touched on the effect that the TikTok ban will have on people who use the TikTok as one of their income generators. So in the US, so a lot of people will now be trying to look for alternative jobs outside of the social media spectrum if they can't revitalize their social media careers, which would likely have an impact on the labor market, which would make it harder for other individuals to get jobs, which would then affect remittances, because if inflation isn't eased, if prices don't ease up, the amount of remittances coming into the region also would be affected. It would go down considerably.
I like that analysis here, Kevin. You give people an enlightening picture of what to expect. I think to bring it down to layman terms, once anything goes up, we cannot beg Uncle Joe, Auntie Janet in the US for the flying blind, as we would say colloquially. We can't pick up the phone and say, hey, I need a little 20 or so, because realistically, things are going to be biting and getting much more tight in the US. But I want to get from you guys when we come back from the break, what are you looking forward to in 2025? Because I think this is the year coming out of what we saw last year. This is the year where much of that is going to roll over. And, the challenges that you guys mentioned now, that potential challenges that Trump is coming into office might fear. So when we come back, we can discuss that as we look forward to 2025. And call us if you want to share your thoughts and anything that we discuss, you can do that as well. And we are back here on Inside the News. I am Jermaine Abel, your usual host for Saturday. And I'm joined by journalist Devon Cornelius and FM senior journalist Kevin Brown. Andre dropped off. Our program is remote today. Yes, we've taken it on the road, and we are discussing 2024, some of the major highlights, issues, the implications in Kitts and Nevis. Also, we're looking ahead to 2025. And guys, before I took the break, because this is our final segment, we are looking at 2025. What are the big happenings that you guys expect for 2025? I know Trump is coming in, that's going to have some repercussions. But when we look at, let's start locally, what do you guys foresee as being the big issues that are going to be on the table for discussions, for coverage for 2025? Devon?
Well, for me, is more so hopes and aspirations for 2025 as it relates to the media landscape. More training opportunities so that we could continue to build upon what we already know. We hone our craft. Free
Okay. Devon, are you still with us? Okay. Kevin, what do you foresee as being the major issues that we have to cover for 2024, for 2025?
One of the things I think would be a major issue, well, maybe not a major issue, but would receive major coverage. Well, two of them really. The inevitability of the smart hospital that is supposed to be coming to the Island Federation. We've heard about that a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. Seeing that come to fruition, see that come to fruition within 2025. That, of course, would be a big talking point, a big thing to cover if it does come, if it doesn't come. Similarly, the housing initiative where we're supposed to get 2,400 homes, affordable housing. and the start of the distribution of those homes, well, the building of them and the start of the distribution of those homes. So I think those two are two major things that I'm looking out for as it relates to them coming to fruition or not and covering them.
Well, from my perspective, there are a couple of things that I'm looking forward to. One, how do we continue to deal with this whole issue of crime and violence, for example? That has long been an issue plaguing us in the country. How do we deal with the CBI program? Because that is an issue that we have been discussing for quite some time. It's only because of the MSI issue last week that a lot more information came out. Additionally, on the health side, yes, the smart hospital is part of it, but also how do we as people take pride in what we do to take care of ourselves? Because as you would have been hearing and reading, diabetes is on the rise in St. Kitts and Nevis. And Dr. O'Loughlin said basically for last year, we kept seeing more people coming down with diabetes week in and week out. So how do we deal with those issues? For me, going forward would be critical for at least some, would be critical for the society itself. Andre, I want to get from you, what are you looking forward to? What are the big issues you're looking forward to in 2025?
Because it's not level.
Andre?
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Hold on, you're here. All right, sorry. I'm just
Yeah, I was saying, what are some of the big issues, stories that you're looking forward to in 2025?
Oh, well, I guess, as I said earlier, with the issue of crime, we want to see the trend continue, the positive trend at that end of the year. I know the police would have reported that they made several arrests and detection of crime in 2024. Nevis is reporting, I believe, an 11% decline in serious crimes on Nevis, and also an increase in the detection rate there. So long may that continue, and that trend could get better for both islands. I'm also looking, the CBI is always a major story. Yes, the lawsuit from MSR Media has ended for St. Kitts Nevis and St. Lucia as well, because they were also implicated. I guess the questions are, one, we're looking at now what reforms in terms of the continuing reform that the government is pursuing, whether those reforms are going to bring any positive results. We know there has been a significant decline in revenues on the CBI, so will we see a bounce back? The Prime Minister did indicate that they're looking at seeing some bounce back in the figures now that they've done the reforms. I know
like
attempts were made. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello?
Can we also expect more transparency with the program as well? We're getting figures here and there, but we're not getting a comprehensive report per se on the performance of the CBI. So we're hoping that we can see some changes in that. And I think, generally speaking, we're going to be seeing stories on the economy because, as you pointed out, with the Donald Trump presidency, there's going to be some changes in the economy. How will this impact St. Kitts and Nevis? We know there are some impacts that we're feeling already, and the government is attempting to minimize that for the people. How much is that going to be working? We'll have to assess it in a few months' time. So there are so many things that we need to cover, and so many yet to be told. But these are some of the three stories I'm looking forward to: economy, crime, and the CBI.
Okay, one of the things that we didn't touch is the political landscape, right? And I want to get your perspective on that as we wind down the program. What specifically, or how do you guys actually, are we getting anywhere, especially when we talk about this whole thing of fair share, you know, we talk about the budget and so forth, and people are criticizing the double salary. What are your take on it as we begin to, we have just about 50 minutes left on the program. So about the current political landscape in St. Kitts and Nevis. The hunt?
Yes, Chairman. I fell out earlier, some challenges with the internet. Quickly, if I could make the point about in terms of what I expect to see for 2025. I was talking about the Aspire program, and then I wanted to look at the agenda that the government launched, I believe, in 2023 as it relates to sustainability. We're talking about the Sustainable Island State Agenda. So some of the projects and initiatives that they have announced then, I would hope that we could see it concretized and come to fruition in 2025. As it relates to the political landscape in St. Kitts and Nevis, I believe there is a bit of a tension. And I say that because of the approach that the government has taken, in the sense, firstly, with the double salary, as you made mention of. Over the years, the double salary has been a thing offered here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and what the Prime Minister has essentially said is the approach of it is not sustainable. You understand? Because what the double salary essentially is double the wage bill. And what he has been hinting at is, let me offer something that would reach and benefit more people instead of civil servants. Now, that is going away from the norm, and in any space, in any community, when you begin to do things that are differently, you are going to receive some pushback, as this administration has been receiving some pushback with regards to the stance on the double salary. But the approach that has been taken is to do something that would reach more people, which I understand. But the political landscape is tense in the sense that the opposition parties are, I would say, taking every chance they get to criticize, as opposition parties would do. So I'm not calling out the opposition parties for criticizing, because I believe in any democracy, you must have a strong opposition. And so the opposition parties are using every opportunity to criticize the sitting administration in terms of some of the policies and initiatives that they have announced. But I will say this, heading into the next election, let's look at St. Kitts firstly. So you have the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, which I would say essentially has all of their candidates. When you look at the opposition parties, in particular, the People's Labour Party and the People's Action Movement, they have not named all of their candidates. And we're talking about a federal election that will be held or constitutionally due in 2027. And so 2025 should be the year when political parties on St. Kitts launch their candidates or begin to hit the ground running. Political parties in opposition and, of course, the party in government. When you go over to Nevis, it is the same thing. You have the Concerned Citizens Movement, which is the current administration there. And then you have the main opposition, which is the Nevis Reformation Party. If they are to compete in the upcoming election, or the 2025 is the year where they too would have to launch their full slate of candidates, as they believe they're missing one for Gingerland. So they would have to launch his full slate of candidates and really show that, hey, we are coming to compete and we're trying to offer something that is better. So 2025 for me, German, will be an interesting year in the political arena. You're going to see some surprises. You're going to see some disappointments. And it is one that I would encourage each and every one of you, my colleagues here, to stay tuned and pay attention to.
Why does it sound like Devon is giving us some inside scoop into something, some story that he's going to be breaking over there on
It sounds like Devon is planning to launch his political.
No. But I follow politics. You guys are. I follow the politics, and I can tell you based on what you're seeing. And especially, again, I did make the point that 2027 is when the elections are due. So if you don't begin to hit the ground now in 2025, then you can't be serious about competing in the next elections. Am I correct?
That is true. You are correct. You are correct.
All right.
Okay, on to your position on what's happening politically in the country.
Well, I made the point that you can't talk about news on another program, that you can't talk about news in St. Kitts News and not talk about politics, because St. Kitts News is fueled on politics. It is one of the few countries in the Caribbean where it's almost campaign period every single year. So even though elections are constitutionally due in 2027, as Yvonne pointed out, politicians and political parties are going to be mobilizing in 2025. Remember also that there's a trend in the Caribbean, generally speaking, that 1 year before an election is constitutionally due, especially if the incumbent believes they have a strong position, they tend to call elections early. And since the power resides in the prime minister to call elections, then parties that are looking to unseat a government will always have to be ready. They will always have to be in high gear. So at 2025, 2 years before, you're looking at a year before the eve of the election, parties are going to be in election mode. So I do expect some politicking, so to speak, from especially the opposition parties. Me personally, I don't think there's going to be an early election, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. So I believe that you're going to be seeing some mobilizing from the political parties. As Devon rightfully pointed out, and this is something that is of interest, the Labour Party, which is the incumbent, they already have, it is believed that all those who have contested last election more than likely will be contesting, including especially those who are currently in Parliament. The PLP and the People's Action Movement, they will have some rebuilding to do in terms of introducing new candidates in some of the constituencies, if not most of the constituencies. So we are expecting, and I think the PLP somewhat has started with the announcement of their party chairs in each constituency, and is highly believed that some of these party chairs are going to be candidates in the elections. So we expect to see some kind of action from the People's Action Movement in 2025. So I do expect some politicking to happen, and it will increase if an election is not called in 2025, which I don't expect. We expect that to increase in 2026. So the preparation starts now.
Okay, Kevin, I want to get quickly from you the political landscape, but I want to end with each one of you guys telling me you have just about 6 minutes left. One good story that occurred in 2025, in 2024. But I want to get your take, Kevin, quickly on the political landscape.
My take is that we're always in election season. That's always been my take. We're always in election season. Everybody's always campaigning, to be quite honest. But as Devon and Andrew pointed out, like everybody, not just the opposition, but the opposition parties, but the incumbent has to start hitting the ground now. And we, a lot of times, because of certain, I don't know, certain precedents set, sometimes the incumbent gets lazy, but I don't think that is a smart move for the current administration. So that's why I said that I think that every single party needs to start hitting the ground now, in preparation for when the election is called. I think there will be some changes. I think there might be some upsets. We are not a big polling community, so we don't really go with polls. We more or less go with the feel of people. And we more or less go with the flow of the people. And right now, it feels like change is gonna come.
That's an interesting take there from Kevin. Interesting. You hear he called it first, people. So yes, we have just about 4 minutes left, people. Guys, what's that one good story you want to leave with us that occurred in 2024?
The one story that you want to leave with the audience, you said?
Yeah, one good story that occurred in 2024.
For me, it was the Aspire, and I say that because I have Well, my nieces and nephews, I call them my nibblings. Um, I say it's a good story because when I was 5 years old, German, nobody deposited $500 into my account and opened shares and all them things for me. So I think this current generation is very lucky to see that the government decided to open an account for them and basically preparing to teach them about financial wealth and money management and all of these things. So I think that's a feel good story. I'm not looking at the politics of it. I don't really care about the politics of it. I'm just looking at the fact that children and young people are being prepared for the real world because nobody really prepares you for the real world when you're talking about money management and financial management and so on, right? So to me, that is good. So I'm just encouraging people to maximize on that and build on it.
Andre?
For me, I believe I'm gonna go on a sporting note. The which actually still made news. The appointment of Michael Louis as a member of the West Indies cricket team, creating history. Remember, St. Kitts has been yearning for years to have a St. Kitts born cricketer being selected as part of the West Indies team. And we've had so many brilliant cricketers over the years, going far back as the 1970s, coming all the way up, that didn't make the West Indies team. And for a young man as Michael Louis, coming from a cricketing family, to do that, the response from the nation and the government also awarding him for this accomplishment was, in my view, one of the best stories for 2024. And he went out and he gave a creditably good performance representing the West Indies. He also had the opportunity to play for the St. Kitts Davis Patriots and play home games right here in St. Kitts at Warner Park, and had a brilliant performance. I forgot against which team it was, but he had a brilliant performance in one of those games in front of the home crowd. And I felt very good for him and his family. So for me, that is one of the bright sparks of 2024.
Love it. Kevin? I think Kevin is still compiling his best story for the year.
I like that. I like that. I just wanted to highlight the work of the Robotics Association. I think they've been doing fantastic work in increasing not just the local participation in robotics, but actually reaching out regionally and liaising with other people in the region to increase our capacity to produce young people who can become mechanical engineers, civil engineers, robotic engineers, and that kind of thing. That's one of the things. That's one of the highlights for me.
Oh, well, guys, thank you for taking your Saturday morning, taking time out your Saturday morning to join us. It was a really good conversation. I'm sorry that the lady in the room, not our producer Sharon, but Miss Jamiela Maxwell, she was having technical issues today, so she dropped off the conversation. Yeah, it was a very fruitful discussion. We reviewed several of the major happenings for 2024 and what we look forward to in 2025. Broadly, though, I must say, each of us in this room, we're journalists. At the end of the day, it's our job to bring you the information. You heard from three of them. Well, Jamie was having issues, but nevertheless, they have committed to continue providing you with the details on the big stories, the big happenings, and the day-to-day runnings in St. Kitts and Nevis. Guys, thank you. We had with us Devon Cornelius, host and journalist over at ZIZ, one of them senior journalist Kevin Brown, and CEO and journalist and president of the Media Association, Andre Hewitt. I am German Ebert, thanking you for being here. We did take the program on the road today. Everything is virtual for this initial program today, but nevertheless, we'll be back in studio next week. And until then, but on a note, we'll bring you an interesting story on Monday, which was part of the discussion today about Donald Trump's inauguration. We'll have an exclusive for you on Monday. So do stick and stay tuned. In the meanwhile, do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Till next time.
All right, you too, Jermaine. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jermaine. Thank you.
Thanks, Jermaine.